welcome. You're joining us for a deep dive into something, well, a lot of people seem to have noticed recently, this kind of shrinking footprint of McDonald's locations right in the heart of downtown Chicago. We're going to dig into the source material you've shared with us today. It's a YouTube video transcript specifically looking at this question: why are the Golden Arches vanishing in the Loop?
Right. And our mission here really is to unpack the different factors the source presents. Why are these familiar spots going away? And what else does the source suggest is happening in those areas, like the Loop?
Okay, so let's jump right in. Let's see what this source says and what insights we can pull out. It starts with a pretty clear observation. Basically, people who work downtown spend time there, especially in the Loop. They've seen these McDonald's that were always, there, and now they're just... Yeah, the source actually pinpoints it. It notes 4 specific locations disappeared, all within like a 10-minute walk of each other right there in the Loop area. It even mentions folks working nearby, like at CBS, noticing the changes, referencing, I think, the one on Clark Street.
That's right. And what's really fascinating, as the source points out, is that McDonald's Global HQ, it's only about a mile away from this very area.
Oh, a mile?
Yeah. But according to the source, when corporate was actually asked about these specific closures, the reply was reportedly, well, pretty vague, non-explanatory, though the source does mention a separate contact indicated something else.
Oh.
Yeah, that for at least one closure, factors like crime and tensions involving the unhoused population were cited.
Okay, so it's definitely not a simple single reason then, is it?
No, not at all. The source really doesn't land on just one thing. It layers together several intertwined theories and observations. And, well, a major theme that keeps coming up in the source material is the role of crime, and maybe a sense of lawlessness.
Okay, let's unpack that. How does the source actually frame this crime angle? Because it sounds like it really pushes this as a pretty significant factor, not just for Chicago, but maybe for McDonald's elsewhere too.
Yeah, it makes a pretty strong argument that, quote, lawlessness is impacting these stores directly. And it connects this specifically to its view of certain, progressive cities. It actually names Chicago and New York.
Okay.
And the source claims that in these cities, the legal system isn't really holding people accountable for things like assault or even petty crime. It points to what it calls lax bail laws, repeat offenders getting released quickly, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the source suggests this then attracts what it calls the wrong type of foot traffic, which, according to the source, tanks these places. It's presenting this as a systemic issue impacting the business environment there.
That's quite a claim the source is making there. It even draws a comparison between Chicago and New York, doesn't it?
It does.
Mentioning that even in New York, stores near really busy spots like transit hubs or Times Square, they seem to be finding ways to stay open. And the source hints that maybe it's partly because customers can use mobile ordering and then just, quote, flee the store as soon as they grab their food, like minimizing time inside.
Exactly. And, to counter these kinds of issues the source describes, it points to some McDonald's locations elsewhere implementing, almost extreme safety measures.
Ah, okay. This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Based on the source, it gives specific examples, right? Brooklyn, New York, and somewhere in Virginia.
That's right. A location on Nostrand Avenue in Brooklyn and one on Franconia Road in Fairfax County, Virginia.
So what are these measures? The source details on them.
Oh, yeah. And they're pretty surprising. In Brooklyn, the source says anyone under 20 needs to show ID or be with a parent. And get this, it's apparently backed by security guards, even NYPD officers sometimes. And then in Fairfax County, Virginia, the source reports that customers over 21, they actually have to ring a doorbell just to be let inside the restaurant.
Ring a doorbell to get into a McDonald's. Seriously. What's the reasoning the source gives for why they'd go that far?
Well, the reasoning presented is pretty stark. The source claims these specific locations are just too often the sites of violent incidents, often involving young people, both victims and perpetrators.
Right.
The source even quotes a spokesperson from that Fairfax County location saying things like student violence and just disrespectful behavior. They were erupting there maybe once a week at least.
Once a week.
Yeah. And the source notes these places are often near schools, Thomas Edison High School in Fairfax, other schools near the Brooklyn spot. So it suggests that youth violence might be becoming, quote, an out-of-control problem.
And didn't the source also include a little anecdote from Fairfax, something about a customer?
It did, yeah. Someone apparently said that because of this new doorbell policy, it was the first time in maybe 5 years They actually felt comfortable enough to, sit down inside and just enjoy a hamburger there.
5 years. That really paints a picture of the safety concerns highlighted in the source, doesn't it?
It really does. But shifting gears just a bit, the source also brings in another perspective. It includes input from the Illinois Restaurant Association.
Ah, okay. So, moving beyond just crime, what about the economics? What does the source tell us is happening there affecting places like McDonald's?
Well, according to the association's view, as presented in the source, restaurants have been hit hard with cost increases since 2020.
How hard?
We're talking a 35% jump in labor costs,
Yeah.
another 35% rise in purchasing costs, so food and supplies, and almost a 20% increase in fixed costs like rent, utilities, things like that.
Oof. Those are big numbers.
They really are.
And source said something else too, right, from the consumer side.
Yeah, it argues that maybe people are also cutting back on fast food generally, because in the source's view, it's, quote, no longer fast, maybe not actually food. That's pretty harsh, and the price has gone way up.
That is a blunt assessment the source presents. Wow.
It is, but then the source pivots again. It contrasts McDonald's situation with other businesses in the loop that are apparently doing well, succeeding even.
Right, that's an important point. If McDonald's is struggling there, what's happening with other places? The source mentioned some examples.
It did. Christopher Alden opening a place called Memento, described as a fast casual taqueria, but it also has a sit-down side and, interestingly, self-serve liquor.
Okay.
And it also points to the success of Amarino. That's a gelato franchise.
Gelato. Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the deal with Amarino? The source highlighted something specific.
Yeah, this is pretty striking. The source notes that the Amarino location in Chicago is apparently #1 in sales out of 300 locations across 19 countries.
Number one, globally.
Exactly. And they're even planning to open another spot. So this leads the source to argue, well, maybe McDonald's closing isn't proof that no business can make it downtown. Perhaps it suggests that businesses with different structures, different payment models, maybe different clientele, they might be finding ways to thrive where McDonald's isn't.
So the source is kind of getting into the business model itself.
Seems like it, yeah. It draws this distinction. McDonald's, it says, often involves, getting a tray, sitting down for maybe 30, 40 minutes.
The traditional fast food experience.
Right. Whereas places like Amarino, it characterizes them as more of a get it and leave type of place, quick transaction.
I see.
And the source speculates maybe that model, the quick in and out, is something McDonald's needs to adopt more aggressively to survive in these kinds of urban cores.
Interesting thought. Now, the source also tackles another potential explanation head on, doesn't it? The idea about foot traffic.
It does, yeah. It specifically pushes back against the idea that these closures are happening simply because, maybe fewer people are downtown after the pandemic. Lack of foot traffic.
And how does it counter that? Does it offer evidence?
It does. It cites some data points, like the first quarter of this year apparently saw 1 million people come downtown, generating something like $280 million in economic impact.
1 million people.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like a ghost town.
Not at all. And the source adds that downtown foot traffic on weekends is reportedly even higher now than it was before the pandemic.
Higher. Okay.
So based on that data, the source concludes pretty firmly. Foot traffic isn't the problem here. It circles back, really, to what it sees as a law and order problem.
And from there, the source kind of broadens the lens again, touching on the political situation in Chicago.
Right.
It mentions Mayor Johnson.
It does. Here's what the source presents on that front. And remember, this is the source's perspective we're reporting on here.
Right. Important clarification.
It claims the mayor is dealing with some serious budget deficits across the RTA, the CTA, Chicago Public Schools. Big financial challenges. And then the source alleges that while the mayor and other Illinois officials might state that crime is down, the source calls these claims bogus.
Strong word. Does it offer justification for that label?
It tries to. It brings up an example from New York, claiming transit commanders there allegedly faked crime stats, and it shares a personal anecdote about a carjacking supposedly happening near the mayor's own house. But the source also suggests, maybe, that fixing the crime issue is tough for just one mayor. It points fingers more broadly at other, quote, progressive leaders and laws that, again, in the source's view, don't effectively hold repeat offenders accountable. It's a very specific and critical take on how crime is being handled politically.
Got it. So the source is presenting a particular viewpoint on the politics and policies surrounding crime.
Exactly. And it wraps up this line of argument with one more point about who is most affected. It argues that the kind of crime impacting businesses like McDonald's, it's not primarily happening in, quote, rich neighborhoods or affecting rich, wealthy restaurants.
Okay. So where then?
It claims it's happening in places where the middle class tends to spend their money. And the source's conclusion is, if that middle class starts feeling unsafe, well, they stop coming. The customer base shrinks. And these accessible, everyday places end up closing down.
Phew.
Mm.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack from just one source.
Oh.
We've really gone through multiple layers here, haven't we?
We have.
From, specific McDonald's closing to broad issues of urban safety, economic pressures, different business models, even touching on the political landscape as presented by the source.
Absolutely. This source paints a really complex picture. It acknowledges things like economic headwinds, maybe changing consumer tastes, even questions about McDonald's basic business model in these areas. But yeah, it puts a heavy emphasis on crime, this perception of lawlessness, and the extreme safety measures some places are resorting to as being a major, major driver behind these specific closures and the challenges these businesses face.
So thinking about all this, well, what does this deep dive into one source's perspective mean for you, the listener? Well, even if you don't live in Chicago or even visit these specific spots, it really shows how these big, complicated issues, things like urban safety, economic shifts, even claims about local politics, how they can play out in really tangible ways. Ways that affect everyday businesses, the places you might rely on, maybe just for a quick bite or a coffee. It really underscores the source's point about how that feeling of safety, or lack thereof, can directly impact where people choose to spend their time and, crucially, their money. This has definitely been a fascinating deep dive into one source's explanation for why McDonald's locations might be disappearing from downtown Chicago.
It has, and it certainly leaves us, and hopefully you, with a lot to consider. Maybe here's a final thought drawn from the source to leave with you. Given the source's suggestion that the businesses thriving in the loop seem to be more focused on that get it and leave kind of interaction,
Right.
and its speculation that McDonald's might need to lean into that model more to survive there, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Does the future for some of these familiar, accessible businesses in busy urban centers perhaps depend less on, traditional hospitality, sitting down, staying a while, and more on just figuring out how to get customers in and out safely and quickly?
That's definitely something to mull over. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope exploring this particular source's perspective gave you a clearer understanding of some of the complex factors it suggests are at play.